Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Code and the Coding Coders Who Code It. I'm your host, Drew Bragg, and I'm joined today by a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to make him do one anyway, the one and only Aaron Francis. Aaron, for anyone who has not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, would you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure, I would be happy to, and thanks for having me. My name is Aaron Francis, and I am a coding coder who codes. I traditionally have been a backend developer, mostly in Laravel. These days, I find myself doing a lot of database content and making a lot of videos, still programming in Laravel, but focusing a lot on creating a lot of content.
That is an understatement for sure. For anyone new to the show, the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask Aaron 3 questions. I'm going to ask him what he's working on, which is sort of a bonkers question to be asking him since he's always working on a million things. We're going to ask him anyway. We're going to ask him what kind of blockers he has. And if he doesn't have a current blocker, what's a recent blocker he had and how do you go about solving it? And then we're going to wrap up the show with what is something cool, new, or interesting that you've learned or discovered recently. I feel like that could be another bonkers question to be asking you. This episode is probably going to have a lot of content to it. So let's just jump right into it. Aaron, what are you working on?
I am working on parenting 4 kids under 3. Well, I guess 3 and under now.
2 sets of twins, right?
2 sets of twins, 2 3-year-olds, 2 8-month-olds. I am trying to propagate a lot of plants out there in the sunshine. But probably what people are mostly interested in is work stuff. So a couple months ago, me and a friend set out on our own to start a video studio of all things, focused solely on technical content. So making videos developers actually would care to watch. And we have just released our first course, which is a course on SQLite, the database, at highperformancesqlite.com. We're working on Postgres next. And in the meantime, we're doing lots of YouTube videos, live streams, writing, being on podcasts, all kinds of stuff like that. And building out our own platform. So all the video hosting stuff that we've done, like the course hosting, is all on a platform that we built ourselves. So staying extremely busy.
I feel like the most appropriate follow-up question to that is how in the world do you have time to start essentially your own company while producing all of this content and also raising 4 kids?
Yeah, a lot of help, first of all. My wife works twice as hard as I do as a stay-at-home mom, so that helps a ton. We have an au pair that lives with us because at one point we had 2 2.5-year-olds and 2 newborn babies. And so while Jennifer and I were like feeding newborn babies, there are still 2 2.5-year-olds that exist. We needed another adult. So we have a nice young woman from Germany that lives with us. So that helps a lot. But then, of course, I'm there at home for breakfast and then I'm back home at 6 o'clock for dinner. And so all of my like outside of work time is no longer, I'll just hack on some stuff on the side. It's just fully walk in the door and just go straight into parent mode. But that happens to be okay now because I'm not trying to do stuff on the side. The stuff that was historically side stuff is now full-time job stuff. And so there was a period before the second set of twins came where I had a full-time job and I was able to do some stuff on the side just because it was a lot easier with 2 kids. Go to bed at 7 o'clock, you find yourself with a lot of time, right? But now things have definitely changed and none of this content stuff would be doable if I had a proper full-time job that I was responsible for.
One of the coolest projects that I think I've seen you kind of, let's just call it build in public, is your office shed project. And so you work from home, but not in the home. You actually have a separate office. And that's fascinating to me because a lot of the recommendations, especially when the pandemic hit, and we all went remote, whether we wanted to or not, was, hey, how do we make that not a commute anymore, but how do we shift from work mode to home mode? And everyone said, pretend like you're going to work. Do you find that that is in fact true when you can kind of help separate work Aaron and home life Aaron by physically going in and out of your shed?
Yeah, definitely. So I no longer own the shed, unfortunately. We used to live in a 2-bedroom house When we found out we were having a second set of twins, we were like, oh no, this is not going to work. But in that house, I ordered a pre-built shed. I live in Dallas, Texas, and there's tons of these shed companies out in the country. And so I ordered one from Central Texas. They brought it on the back of an 18-wheeler, put it in my backyard, and then I turned it into an office. I added cabinets and a desk and air conditioning, and it was a huge, fun project. Even just walking across the back deck to go into the office, there's just something different about your workspace being air gapped from the house where it's, okay, it's 20 steps, but I know that when I'm on a call, I'm not having to worry, like, am I keeping the kids awake? Or does my wife have to worry, like, oh, I got to keep the kids quiet because Aaron's on a call? And then being able to leave that space and walk back inside, either for lunch or at the end of the day, having the computer stay in a different spot. I think the worst would be if it's in your bedroom. Like you work there all day, you go out for a minute to have the evening, and then you come back to your bedroom and it would just feel so sleepy. But now that I don't have the shed, so we moved into this new house, and it's just not a big enough house for me to have either an office or a backyard shed, unfortunately. So I did something even crazier. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment. So the place that I'm calling from right now, the place where I record all of my videos, this backdrop, this is a 1-bedroom apartment 3 minutes down the road from my house. Actually, Steve and my company pays for it now. If I were a normal person, this is the bedroom. And so I record in here because I've got the carpet. And then if you look behind me, you'll see that there's this beautiful wall behind me. In fact, that wall doesn't exist. Behind that are some windows. And so I built a fake 2x4 wall in front of the windows in this apartment bedroom to control the light. And because this is the longest direction and I wanted to shoot directly that way. And so in here is my studio. And then out in what is the living room, I have another desk and a couch where I just sit and work when I'm not recording. And it looks over the apartment swimming pool. And I've got my own kitchen and my own bathroom. And there's a gym downstairs. What if co-working were amazing and it was just you? I don't know if we call that co-working anymore, but it's awesome. And I love it so much. I love that it's 3 minutes from the house. And I love that I can just come up here and I've got my smoothies and my soda waters and my own private bathroom. And I just feel like this is truly living. It's quite awesome.
That does sound pretty awesome. So you were a predominantly backend developer with Laravel. How did you get into screencasting in general? You've done a ton of content, but how'd you get into all of that?
In an unlikely turn of events, my first screencast I ever did was for sophomore accounting students at Texas A&M University. And so that requires a little bit of unpacking. So I got my undergrad and master's in accounting at Texas A&M, and then went on to get my CPA license and be accountant for 1 year. And I did tax accounting, and it was awful. I worked at Ernst & Young, and it was terrible. And so I quit. But the thing is, I really, really, really enjoyed accounting in college. I just ate it up. It was so fun. Accounting is like programming, but for business. Everybody's like, oh, I'm just so terrible at math. Accounting's not math. If you can do addition, subtraction, you can do accounting. Accounting is a big puzzle, and it's so fun. So after I took this class sophomore year of college, I'm already a programmer. And so accounting like clicks in some part of my brain in a similar way. I'm going to start tutoring other students. And so from sophomore all the way through like master's year, I just tutored this accounting class for fun, well, for pay, but because I enjoyed it. And I left college, didn't do any side stuff for a while, and I was just tinkering on some software products. And then I realized, hey, I'm really good at teaching accounting. Accounting never changes. If there's one thing that doesn't change, it's double entry accounting. And so I just started recording basically everything I knew about accounting and made it into like my first ever video course. And this had to be 2016 or 17 or something. Selling it to the worst possible market, which is college students, in the smallest possible niche, which is sophomore business majors at Texas A&M University. From a business perspective, objectively, the worst thing that you could ever do. And all these years later, it's made over $100,000. Oh man, maybe all this business advice is not totally applicable to everyone all the time. And so that's when I got the first taste of, one, the scalability of teaching online, but two, like sort of the mailbox money. If there's mailbox money, it is in accounting videos because I honestly haven't touched them since I first recorded them. I haven't really done anything. So that was my first video course ever. And then since then, I have kind of leaned into the fact that I enjoy teaching and I'm good at it. And so I've started to put more stuff on video.
It's great when you can make a living doing something that you enjoy and you're good at. You're living a bit of the dream. How did you get into Laravel then?
I started programming when I was 10, 11, 12, something like that. And quickly after starting with ASP.NET, I switched to PHP just because it was a lot more popular and it was much more of a broad beginner language at that time. And so at this point, I've been doing PHP for 20 years. And after college, one of the things I was hacking on was who knows what it was, some product SaaS, whatever. And I picked up frameworks were starting to become a big deal. I read some books on Rails and Ruby never really clicked in my mind because I had such a PHP background. And so then I heard about a framework called Yii, Y-I-I, and I used that for a while. And then I was in the space and I kept hearing people talk about Laravel. And so I checked out the docs and I think I picked up Laravel 4.234 or something like that. So it was many, many, many years ago. And it made sense. It made sense with the way that I thought about things. And it was quickly becoming the most popular PHP framework. And now I think it might as well be the only one. It's built on top of Symfony, but it's far and away the most popular PHP framework. And so I've just kind of stuck with it ever since.
You've also done a lot of database content. Is that just an artifact of, hey, I did a lot of backend work and was good at databases and wanted to share what I had learned? Or was it a, hey, I see a gap in the content out there for databases? How'd you go from PHP and Laravel to databases?
Yeah, that's a good question. Both is the answer. So I come by it honestly because my dad was a DBA growing up. He was a SQL Server DBA. And so when I started messing around with PHP, the database du jour was MySQL, and I think probably still is for PHP. And so I picked up PHP and MySQL together. Used to be, you'll remember, that we just had to do everything. If you were going to make an app, you had to know the database all the way through to the jQuery. I know I'm old and yelling at the cloud now, but that was good for me because I learned how to set up the LAMP stack and how to make sure that MySQL is running. Again, I feel like that databases just clicked in my mind. It was very logical and rational. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. And of course, whenever I got stuck on SQL, which happened a lot when you're 13, you have one of the world's foremost experts in the house because there just aren't that many DBAs in the world. And he was a very good one. And so I could always ask. So I felt like I internalized SQL pretty early on. And the second option that you mentioned was, did I notice there was a gap in the market? And I think that is what spurred me to start creating content around it. I intrinsically really liked it and got it and happened to be very good at it. And I started having these conversations with friends where I would tell them how to fix their database stuff. And people kept saying, like, man, how do you know all this? You should be writing articles about this. That's the point where it occurred to me, or I realized, man, maybe I do know more than the average developer about databases. And so that's when I started writing about it and doing some video stuff. And since then, I have more fully leaned into it because I do think there's a dearth of the middle content for databases. This is no shade, but just use Supabase and don't worry about the database. Hey, that's actually really convenient. Or the content is, hey, you want to be a DBA? You want to live underground and work with the databases? Here's the content for you. And that's great. But I think there's a big missing middle of people that don't want to be a DBA, but would like to know, how can I, for myself, determine what a good index is? And so there's that whole missing middle for people that want to be really good drivers of a database, not creators of a database, but they want to know how to use the thing. And so that's kind of the section of the market that I have carved out. I think my life would be super hard if I was teaching React or teaching Ruby on Rails or TypeScript or something where there are tons and tons and tons of really good teachers and a lot of great content. That would be really hard. I happen to think I'm a good teacher, but I'm also playing on easy mode because I'm competing against basically nobody. Name another super popular database educator. You'll probably name Alex Jabri, and he just sticks with Dynamo, right? And then there's Tobias Petrie, who knows almost everything about everything, but he doesn't do video. It's wide open. I can kind of do whatever I want. And so that's been really nice. So it was a lot intrinsic and then a little bit exploitative in a way that I'm exploiting an opportunity, not a person.
TryHard Studios is the business that you've co-founded, and you guys have released SQLite first. You're doing Postgres next, you said?
Yep.
What else is on kind of the roadmap or vision for that studio? What do you hope that business venture turns into?
I hope it turns into $2 million per year, one for me and one for Steve. That is my hope. So I think we can mine this vein for a long time. I think we can continue to make intermediate database content until I'm tired of making intermediate database content. I think I am going to be the limiting reagent, not the universe of content. So there are a few things. We want to get a little empire going. And so across TryHard Studios, we want to have SQLite, Postgres, and MySQL, obviously. Definitely, we got to have those three. And then there's a lot of fun stuff. Do we look at DuckDB? That seems fun. Is the market big? I don't know. Do we look at ClickHouse? That seems cool. I don't know what the market's like. But you can imagine we've got the three flagships, and then we throw in Maria because it's not that different than MySQL. And so we've got this whole stable full of courses, including stuff like SQL for beginners. So let's say we knock out the vendor specific stuff and drop it down a level and go super broad and say, this is a crash course on SQL. You can imagine that being pretty popular. I think beyond the obvious things that we need to just block and tackle, there are some more exciting things that maybe are dreaming a little bit bigger, and that's becoming more of a media company, which would include me not being the only person on camera. So the way that we're set up now is I am on camera. Steve does a lot of other stuff. He does do editing of the videos, but he's more like a producer or like an operations guy. And so he does the editing, but he also sets a lot of the taste and the style and the design, and he does the front end work, and he builds a lot of stuff as well. I would love to be in a spot where somebody comes in. So I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's in the Rails community. Stephen Margem, something.
Yep, I had him on not too long ago.
Yeah. So he's SQLite for Rails. So I would love to have a model, and I'm actually talking to Stephen about this. Love to have a model where TryHard Studios, which is me and Steve, TryHard Studios helps produce a course up to and including flying a person to Dallas and me sitting with them for 5 days while they record in this studio, perhaps. And then Steve does all the post-production and the editing and the graphics and all of that. And then we host it within the TryHard ecosystem. But it's Stephen teaching, and it's Stephen teaching about things that I can't speak to, which would be Ruby on Rails. I can learn enough database stuff where I can be a really good teacher about it. At this point, it's too late for me to learn enough Rails stuff for me to speak intelligently to an intermediate to senior Rails developer. And so you can imagine we've got flagship courses like SQLite, and then we've got SQLite for Rails, SQLite for Laravel, SQLite for Astro, or whatever it is. But those are all done by other instructors. And so that's kind of on the table. And then there's, of course, always the possibility that we stumble across some product in the nature of building a business. We stumble across a product that we think is viable, whether SaaS or one-time software, whatever it is. And Steve is a proper software developer as well. So between me and him, we could build something like that out. But in the near term, we are trying really hard to focus on what is most obvious, and that is Postgres. I think that's our biggest opportunity. And then MySQL is our second biggest opportunity. And so that's kind of the nearest term thing.
You also have a course on screencasting because you do so many things. I can't keep them all straight, but
me either.
You have screencasting.com, which is just multiple hours of you teaching people how to make really good screencasts.
Yep.
Which makes sense for your business too. But if someone was trying to start screencasting, what's the best advice, or what do you think is the best way to make it go from, I wonder if I should do this in Catalyst, and go, yep, now I'm recording screencasts?
Yeah, I would say the best way to go from I wonder if I should do it to recording is for me to tell you that the downside is bounded and the upside is unbounded. You don't really need to know anything beyond that. Everyone that listens to this podcast is smart enough to figure out how to screencast. I think I have a lot of really helpful tips and a lot of really helpful philosophies and a lot of really practical tips in the course. And I think the course is very good. If you're looking for how do I make my screencasts better, go buy the course. If you're thinking, should I start? The answer is yes. Don't buy the course, just start. Just start, put something bad out there. It'll be fine. But I think my way to spur people to action beyond wondering if they should do it is think about what's the worst that could happen. And I think in my estimation, one of the worst things that could happen when you put out a screencast is that you get embarrassed. And I think that is a price worth paying, because the best thing that could happen is it fundamentally changes your life forever. And so that's what I mean when I'm like, the downside is bounded. You waste some time, you look like an idiot, you embarrass yourself. Those things are comebackable. You can get out of that. That's fine. You embarrassed yourself. You made a stupid video and nobody watched it. Who cares? But you make a video and somebody at a company is like, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. We need somebody to come make videos, or we need somebody to come work here, not in DevRel, DevEd or anything. We need somebody to come do the freaking work. And this girl's making videos about it. Let's see if they want to get a job. The number of times that has happened to me is a small handful, but to people, it happens all the time. There's this notion of what is fair and what is real. And what is fair is that everyone would be judged completely objectively on merits. That is fair. What is real is the people that put out the work get this unfair status ascribed to them. Oh, Drew has a podcast. He must be very smart. And you're like, I just have it because I did it, right?
Right, yeah.
Oh, Aaron makes a lot of videos. He knows everything about everything. Nope. I just am out there. And so you think that I'm something special, but I'm not. I'm just everyone else, but I decided to do the thing, right? And so I think that is the reality of how the world works. I don't know that it's entirely fair that just because you write articles, people think you're smarter than people that don't write articles. That's a lot of world to change. And so instead of trying to change the entire world, I'm going to ride that wave and write some articles. And then everybody's going to think I'm super smart. And it's like, oh, dang, that was easy. So if you're thinking about doing it, do it. If you want to get better at it, keep doing it more. And if you want to have help getting better at it, then there is a course for you. But I think the only thing that matters is that you do the thing.
In all the things that you're doing, pick your favorite. I don't have a preference. What's a blocker that you have? And if you're like, no, everything's great right now, what was a blocker that you had and how did you or you and Steve go about solving it?
Yeah, I can tell you our philosophical blocker and I can tell you a technical blocker that we have overcome. So the philosophical blocker is, how do we make this a business? So we put out this course. To date, it sold a fantastic amount. It's made a fantastic amount of money objectively and with absolute reference. It's $115,000, which is just a fantastic amount of money. However, that's a good amount of money unless you're two people working full time for a certain amount of time, right? So if that's the only money we made this year, that would be really bad news. We don't plan on that being the only money. However, we need to figure out, how do we go from selling a course, one-time big launches, to Steve and I are able to have paychecks. And so that's the kind of thing that we're trying to navigate right now. And honestly, we're trying not to think about it too much right now because we're not at the point where we need it to be every month sustainable, because we still have a few giant spikes ahead of us, right? So we still have Postgres, and at some point we still have MySQL, and we can ride those spikes into putting food on the table. But then the question is, all right, we've got SQLite, Postgres, MySQL. I'm starting to want to slow down the course treadmill. How do we make those assets produce enough such that we can survive, and not only survive, thrive? The whole point of doing this is for freedom, and a big part of that is money. And so that's the thing that we're trying to figure out. What is a repeatable marketing channel? Do we need to buy ads? If so, is it Google or is it Reddit or is it Carbon and stuff like that? It's really squishy, but we're trying to go from product launches to sustainable business.
That's one of those blockers that I feel like can scare a lot of people from starting their own businesses. There's a lot in there, and
Yes.
you could be one of the best coders out there and build an amazing product, but well, how do I tell everyone about it, and how do I turn it into something that puts food on the table, especially when you have 4 kids that are going to inhale a lot of food.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's the more technical blocker?
So Steve and we're in different cities, different states, in fact, and we're working on this platform together to host our videos. And there's this one gnarly bug that only, of course, presents itself on Safari iOS. And it's like, come on, man. And so I'm trying to share my local site on my computer, because we're not going to just push over and over and over to try to like debug, because that's going to take 1,000 years. I'm trying to share my local site on my computer with Steve's iPhone. That's, how do we get there? At first, I just spun up ngrok and it kind of worked. I had to do like some header rewriting to map it to my local vanity domain, which is a .test local domain. And it was kind of working, except when, of course, JavaScript comes into play. And so Laravel by default runs a Vite bundler, which is quite nice. Laravel's integration with it is really nice. I never really have to think about it. However, when you're running it locally, it opens up port 5173 or 74 or something. And so like ngrok is proxying all requests to my machine for the website, but then the website is requesting Vite server, which doesn't exist on Steve's iPhone, of course. And so what I ended up having to do was write my own little Laravel command that overtakes, it starts ngrok itself and sets up 2 tunnels, one for the platform.test and one for localhost 5173. So it sets up 2 tunnels. And then I have to do a little bit of monkeying about in Laravel to rewrite the Vite port to be like my ngrok vanity domain. So even from localhost, we're going out to ngrok and then coming all the way back to my computer to hit Vite. But what that means is when Steve loads it on his phone, it looks for assets at platform-test.ngrok.app instead of localhost 5173. So it ended up working. And one of the good things about making content is I made a video out of it. I actually solved a problem. And that's why I like to stay in the game, because if you don't stay in the game, you end up just making like terrible content. This is one of those things where you only would ever know it if you were actually in the game having these problems. And I feel like that makes more compelling content. And so I made a full video about it, and it's great. And it was really frustrating, but at least we solved it and we got some content out of it, which is always fun.
The solving it is always something that feels good, especially when it's a weird one. Like, how in the world am I going to make this work? And then you get the added benefit. And I think that's where a lot of great talks at the various conferences come from, is we had to do this thing at work, or I've been beating my head on how do I solve X, Y, or Z in my side project. And I finally did it. And here's everything I learned over the next half hour. Those are really cool.
We love war stories. That's all we want.
Yeah. The person's passionate about it too.
Yes.
Like they bring this level of, look at what I solved finally.
Yep.
This is amazing. So 2 good blockers. I'm sorry that you have the first one.
Yeah, that's all right.
Definitely can't help you with that because it just sounds scary to me.
Yep. You're not wrong.
No.
It's certainly scary. But yeah, I think we'll get there. I think the good news is we still have much of the expected value lies in front of us. Once Postgres has launched and MySQL has launched and most of the expected value is behind us, then it's going to be like, well, shoot, what do we do now? So right now we're just warming ourselves up to feel terror in the future.
Or you might have it figured out by then. Who knows?
Hey, that'd be great.
So you are in a lot of different things. You work on some cool stuff. You post a ton on your site too of all the cool things that you do. But if you had to pick something in the here and now to say, here is something cool, new, interesting that I've recently learned or discovered or built, doesn't have to be coding related, but if you could have guessed by the name of the show, it absolutely can be. But yeah, I've had cloud whitening and endangered hobbies as my cool, new, or interesting thing that people have brought on. So it doesn't have to be coding related, absolutely can be. What is something cool, new, or interesting that you've recently learned or discovered?
Coding related, I have been trying to build out a little bit of a life automation system because I do feel a little bit overwhelmed, and many of the things that overwhelm me are automatable. And it's just a matter of if I had some computer managing the process and then contacting me at the moment it needed human input, and then I can give it human input and it goes back and does its own thing, that'd be amazing. And so in the course of that, I've done a lot of browser automation. And one of the very neat things that I have discovered is the Chrome remote debugging tools. And what that does is that allows you to connect to a running instance of Chrome and control it, including clicking and typing into text fields. And it's all built into Chrome itself. And so what I can do now is I can automate a browser that's running either on my machine or on Fly.io or anywhere. And it can be doing its thing. And then let's say it reaches a point where it needs a CAPTCHA solved or two-factor. It wants my password and I don't want to like store those credentials anywhere. I just want to type it in. So this browser can run, and the moment it reaches a certain point, it can contact me and say like, hey, I'm stuck at this spot in the code where you told me to wait. So do your thing and let me know when you're done. And I can basically connect to it wherever it may live, do the thing, and then the system can keep going and continue on. So I spent way too much time trying to figure it out. And this was an ngrok exploration as well, because it expects to be like on port 9222 or something. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to put you on a machine somewhere else and contact you over the internet. But it turned out to be really cool. And so I think this has opened up a lot of possibilities, more human-like browsing for things that are pretty sensitive, like Twitter. Like I want to pull all my bookmarks out and categorize them because I have a ton of great content in the bookmarks that I need to refer back to, and it just goes to die. And so stuff like that, where it's, well, my life would be easier if I could set up a system. I've done that. So that's the technical one.
I like that a lot. I have a question. When is High Performance ngrok screencast series coming out? Oh my gosh. Because it sounds like you're becoming a pro.
Ideas for everything else. I really am. I know way more about ngrok than I thought I ever would. There is a part of me that's, hey, browser automation, scraping, like that's a great course. Maybe that's Absolutely. A free course where I like teach. In a previous life, I've done a ton of scraping of publicly available county data here in Texas and have developed some pretty robust systems. And I think it's just, that would be fun. And so that's the curse of making content. Everything I do, I'm like, wow, shoot, now I got to make 100 videos about this. No, you don't. On the non-technical side, I have been working out in the living room area, prototyping a desk plus plant sanctuary. And so I got a big piece of rigid foam from Home Depot and have cut it up to get a physical sense of how big and deep and where this desk should go. And so I've been doing a lot of foam work, but then I decided as a part of this desk setup, I want to have an overhead shelf and have tons of trailing plants up there. So plants that will grow and kind of hang over and down. And so it makes it kind of like a little bit of a oasis or a paradise. And so I have been propagating pothos plants, which is a lot of fun. And so I used actually the same piece of rigid foam, and I got a little foam cutter and I cut a bunch of circles in it. And then I got a bunch of test tubes off of Amazon and did a bunch of clippings and put them in water in the test tubes. And now they're all out there in the sun. And pretty soon I'll have 100 plants, and hopefully they'll start growing over and kind of enclosing my little desk area. It's going to be my study desk. So I'll have a place to do course research and read and write and that sort of stuff. I mean, it'll feel nice and natural. So I'm super excited about that.
That sounds awesome. I love going out and being in the wilderness. And when I can't, I miss all the green. And it sounds like you're going to have a nice middle ground of I have to be inside and studying, but I can be in the green.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you do a lot of building or construction stuff as a kid, or did you just kind of get into it out of necessity and now you just do it because you built a shed, now you've built a wall in your apartment for recording, you're building like a desk sanctuary area for plants. You do a lot of building. Where did that come from?
It all comes from the same place. I like to build stuff.
Okay, sure.
I think there's a contingent of people that are really aspiring to be a pure and excellent programmer, which I admire. I think that's very interesting and a nice pursuit. I would love to be a great programmer, but more than anything, I just want to build stuff. And so sometimes that expresses itself through code. Sometimes that expresses itself through lumber. And so the end goal for me is to have the thing built. And so that's why I build so much physical stuff. But that's also why when it comes to software development, people will be like, hey, Aaron, can you compare Golang to PHP? And I'm like, no, can't. Don't know Go. Not really interested in learning it. It seems cool. I'm not that interested in learning it because my end desire is not to know everything about programming and be a 10x engineer or like have stuff to say about every programming language or every drama in every programming community. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be what would traditionally be called an influencer. I want to be a builder. I want to be a maker. I want to be a creator. And whatever comes out of that, I'm happy to make content about. But that is not my desire to be this person that is an influencer. My desire is to be a person who builds a ton of stuff and throws off byproducts in the process.
That is an admirable thing to strive for. And I think you do it quite well so far, because that's how I think of you in my head, as someone who just builds things and creates things and puts it all out in the world for us to see.
Oh, good.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention while I have you on the show? It's been a blast having you on. I feel like we could talk for hours, but you are a busy man and I want to respect your time.
The one thing I will leave you with is I'm bringing the forum back. I miss forums. I know that makes me 35, but I miss forums. I miss slow, longer form discussions where it's not in Discord, it's not in Slack, it's not on Twitter, it's not siloed in email inboxes. And so I have a plan to add some forums to aaronfrancis.com and seed it. It'll start as, hey, all these people who took my courses, come and join the screencasting one and the SQLite one. But my ultimate evil plan is to have a nice corner of the internet where nice people hang out and talk about all sorts of things. So we'll see if I can pull that off.
Bringing back the forum and populating it with nice people. I like it.
Exactly. That is 100% the goal. Yeah.
That is awesome. So, Aaron, where can folks find you and all of your content on the internet?
Best place is either aaronfrancis.com or Aaron D. Francis on Twitter.
Aaron D. Francis on Twitter and aaronfrancis.com. Thank you for coming on the show, Aaron. It was an absolute blast and an honor to have you on, really. Looking forward to seeing everything you and TryHard Studios does.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Drew.